Hey, welcome back. You know, I was thinking the other day about that feeling of being completely overwhelmed by information. I was scrolling through my phone, and between news alerts, social media, and a dozen open browser tabs, I just had to put it down. And it made me wonder, what did that feeling look like not 1,000 years ago, but nearly 3,000 years ago? What did it mean to try to gather all the world's knowledge in one place? Not with servers, but with clay. That's the story we're diving into today. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is the Curiosity Compendium. Today, we're going to the ancient city of Nineveh on the banks of the Tigris River in the heart of the Assyrian Empire. The year is around the 7th century BCE, and we're here to meet a king, Ashurbanipal. But not just any king. This was a ruler who had a passion that seems almost shockingly modern to us. He was obsessed with collecting texts. His creation, the Library of Ashurbanipal, wasn't just a royal archive. It was an attempt, the first of its kind in history that we know of, to create a universal library, a place to gather every important piece of writing in the known world. Now, when we think library, our minds jump to the Great Library of Alexandria, and that was magnificent. But Ashurbanipal's library predates it by over 4 centuries. This was the original, and its story begins not with a love of sharing knowledge publicly, but with a king's very personal and perhaps anxious desire to understand the secrets of the universe. Ashurbanipal was unique among Assyrian kings. He was literate. In fact, he boasted in his own writings that he learned to read and write cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script pressed into clay tablets, something most kings considered a job for scribes. He studied mathematics, omens, and rituals. He was, in many ways, a scholar king, and he ruled an empire that stretched from the Persian Gulf to Egypt. With that power and his personal curiosity, he launched a project of staggering scale. He didn't just buy books. He sent scribes and agents to every corner of his empire and to neighboring lands, particularly to the ancient scholarly centers of Babylonia. Their mission was to seek out, copy, and collect every significant text they could find. They would borrow original tablets from temple libraries and then meticulously copy them, sometimes even adding a colophon at the end that read, essentially, property of the palace of Ashurbanipal, king of the world. And what did they collect? Everything. This is where the library stops being a simple collection and starts to feel like a snapshot of an entire intellectual universe. There were the epic tales, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest great work of literature we have. Imagine holding the tablet that contains the story of the Great Flood, a story that would echo for millennia. There were hymns, prayers, and rituals, but there were also vast numbers of what we'd call practical and scientific texts. Medical treatises listing symptoms and cures, using herbs and minerals. Legal codes and contracts. Astronomical observations tracking the movements of planets and stars. Omen texts, which were incredibly important. They taught how to read the will of the gods in everything from the shape of a sheep's liver to the patterns of stars. There were grammar texts, dictionaries of Sumerian and Akkadian, and administrative records. This library was an attempt to create a complete, organized system of all knowledge, from how to govern a province, to how to cure a fever, to how to understand the gods themselves. This leads me to a fascinating point about the nature of this knowledge. For Ashurbanipal, this wasn't purely an academic exercise. This was about power, divine and earthly. In the ancient Assyrian worldview, the gods controlled everything. If you could understand their patterns, their signs, their rituals, you could gain their favor and control the fate of the empire. The library was, in a very real sense, an instrument of statecraft. By centralizing all this omniscience, Ashurbanipal was consolidating a kind of spiritual and intellectual authority. He who controlled the texts controlled the blueprint of reality. It's a profound thought, knowledge as the ultimate source of power and stability. But then, as it does, history turned. Ashurbanipal died, and not long after, in 612 BCE, a coalition of the Babylonians and the Medes besieged and sacked the great city of Nineveh. The palace, with its precious library, was burned. The city was razed. And here's the incredible, poetic twist of fate. The fire that destroyed the library is precisely what preserved it for us. The clay tablets, unlike papyrus or paper, didn't burn to ash. They were baked hard in the inferno, like pottery in a kiln. For centuries, they lay buried under the ruins, waiting. Fast forward to the mid-19th century. Archaeologists, led by a man named Austin Henry Layard, began excavating the mounds that hid Nineveh. They discovered room after room, filled not with gold or jewels, but with broken clay tablets. Tens of thousands of them. It was a moment of stunned realization. They had found the physical fragments of Ashurbanipal's dream. The work of piecing them together, literally and figuratively, began, and it continues to this day in the British Museum, where the majority of the tablets now reside. Each fragment deciphered adds another piece to our understanding of the ancient Mesopotamian mind. Sitting here in New York, thinking about this, it gives me a strange sense of connection. As an engineer, I see the library as a system, a remarkably organized, catalog database for its time. As an entrepreneur, I see Ashurbanipal's ambitious vision and the sheer scale of his project management. But as a storyteller, I'm just humbled. I think about a scribe, sitting in a lamplit room nearly 3,000 years ago, carefully pressing a stylus into wet clay, copying a story about a hero's search for immortality. He had no idea that his copy would survive empires, survive fire, and one day be read by someone like me, half a world away and in a completely different millennium. That tablet is a direct line. It's not just a relic, it's a voice. So, what's the takeaway from the first great library in history? It's more than a historical footnote. It's a reminder of a fundamental human impulse to save what we know, to gather our stories, our observations, our fears, and our dreams, and try to fix them against time. Ashurbanipal, for all his imperial motives, was acting on that same impulse we feel today when we save a photo to the cloud, or publish a blog, or yes, even make a podcast. We are all building our own libraries, trying to make sense of the world and leave a mark that says, we were here. This is what we knew. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Curiosity Compendium. If this journey to the dawn of libraries resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd share the show with a curious friend. It helps more people find these stories. For more from me, Ibnul J. Farabi, and the whole team, you can visit our production home at Light Not Studios. https://www.lightnotstudios.com. Until next time, keep wondering.